Welcome to the Final Fantasy Iceberg. If you don't know what an iceberg is, it's kind of like a tier list. The top of the iceberg is stuff everyone knows, and the bottom is more obscure. So with that out of the way, let's get right into it. Tier 1. Chocobos. These giant yellow birds were first introduced in Final Fantasy II. They initially acted as land mounts, but in future games, they gained the ability to traverse mountains, rivers, sea, and sky. The Tactics series also pioneered them as discrete commandable units, with the deadly red chocobo even having the ability to summon a powerful meteor to smite its foes. They've appeared in myriad spin-offs including Chocobo Racing, Chocobo Mystery Dungeon, World of Final Fantasy, and plenty of others. Moogles. Moogles were slated to be included in Final Fantasy II under the name Kudaion, but they were ultimately scrapped. They actually debuted in Final Fantasy III as bodyguards and have appeared in some capacity in every game since. While their appearances are primarily decorative, they have on occasion played a more substantial role. In Final Fantasy VI, for example, a Moogle named Mog could become a permanent party member, and in Final Fantasy IX, a network of Moogles allowed the party to save the game, use tents, and deliver mail via Mognet, the Moogle delivery service. Blue Magic. The Blue Magic skill allows characters to use the abilities of enemies. It can have a wide range of effects, including dealing elemental damage to foes, healing the party, and inflicting a bevy of status effects. It's also notorious for containing some of the most powerful and wacky spells in all of Final Fantasy. In Final Fantasy IX, for example, Queena's Limit Glove can deal a guaranteed 9,999 damage, but only if she is at only 1 HP. Titus's Laugh. In one of the most misunderstood scenes in Final Fantasy X, Yuna summons fake laughter to placate herself and make her journey a little more joyous, and Titus, oblivious to the fact that Yuna is preparing to die at the age of 16, laughs as well. The laughter reads quite appropriately as completely disingenuous, but it's not, as the uninitiated might believe, the product of bad voice acting. Quite the opposite. Yuna is abjectly distraught and Titus is uniquely uninformed, and the result is Jobs. Jobs are interchangeable character classes. They confer abilities, change statistic spreads, and allow for different equipment to be worn on characters. The Black Mage class, for example, allows the use of black magic like fire, increases the magic statistic, and allows rods and robes to be equipped. Crystals. Crystals are a common motif in the Final Fantasy games, frequently acting as a source of great magical power. Many of the series' antagonists aim to control, or in the case of Final Fantasy V, destroy the crystals to gain power and sow chaos. Ivalice. The land of Ivalice first appeared in Final Fantasy Tactics. It's known for having many more anthropomorphic races than the worlds of the other games, like the bunny-eared Viera, the lizard-like Banga, and the slightly rotund Seek. And also, unlike the other games, all Ivalice entries occur in the same universe, though the adventures themselves remain separate and discrete. Undead monsters are easy. Most undead monsters in Final Fantasy are weak against healing. Thus, most of them, and even some undead bosses, can be killed with a single Phoenix Down item, making them some of the easiest in the game. Number differences. The numbering of the originally published games is different in North America and Japan. Final Fantasy IV was the second game released in North America and became Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo. Similarly, Final Fantasy VI was released third and became Final Fantasy III in North America. This was later corrected in the PlayStation re-releases of the games. Spoony Bard. This phrase is from Final Fantasy IV. Edward, a bard, has whisked away Tella's daughter, and this is the best insult he could come up with. Tier 2. By the way, we're keeping these extremely broad, so if you want an iceberg explainer on your favorite games specifically, drop a comment. Sin. The main antagonist of Final Fantasy X is Sin, a gargantuan beast that has one purpose: destroy large and mechanically advanced civilizations. Sin originates from Yu Yevon, a summoner from 1,000 years before the main story. He summoned Sin to ensure Xanarkin's victory in the Machina War, an ancient conflict, but the enormity of Sin destroyed his mind and left Sin a violent behemoth with no master. To defeat Sin, Yunalesca, who is Yu Yevon's daughter, turned her husband Zayon into a faith, which is a statue from which summons arise. Their bond of love summoned an Aeon strong enough to defeat Sin, called the Final Summoning, but Yunalesca's life was ended in the process. However, upon Sin's defeat, Yu Yevon possessed Zayon's body, and Zayon ultimately became the new Sin. The cycle then repeated for 1,000 years until the events of Final Fantasy X. Bad opera singing. In Final Fantasy VI, the blonde bombshell Celis happens to resemble the opera singer Maria, so when womanizer, gambler, and airship owner Setzer threatens to kidnap her, Celis takes her place. While the original game had a MIDI track for the opera, live vocals were added in the Pixel remaster. To me, the vocals are somewhat disappointing, but that's actually intentional. In a promotional video, Nobuo Uematsu revealed that a less operatic vocalist was purposefully chosen for this scene. Celis is not an opera singer. She's a war-hardened general and isn't meant to be completely in her comfort zone, hence the purposely less polished vocal. Junctioning. In Final Fantasy VIII, there are no magic points. Instead, characters draw spells from their enemies, collecting up to 100 of them at a time. These spells can then be junctioned or assigned to different characteristics, and this allows characters to increase their stats, confer status and elemental resistances, and enhance attacks with elements or status effects. However, the result was that using magic would ultimately decrease statistics, and the player was rewarded for relying on physical attacks and limit breaks alone. Magic was certainly usable and powerful, but many players felt the junction system removed a core mechanic from the game and left it monotonous, while others welcomed the innovation. Weapon. The weapons in Final Fantasy are powerful enemies, sometimes super bosses, that recur throughout the series. The concept of weapon first occurred in Final Fantasy VI with Ultima Weapon, who is a required fight on the Forgotten Continent. The concept of weapons was later expanded, with Ultima and Omega weapons being recurring bosses and super bosses in subsequent Final Fantasy installments. The Masamune. The Masamune is a recurring weapon and often the most powerful in any given Final Fantasy game. Perhaps its most iconic appearance is in Final Fantasy VII. It's the iconic weapon of Sephiroth, and it's the implement he uses to kill Aerith. Warmech. Warmech is a powerful enemy that appears in Final Fantasy and is arguably the first super boss of the series. It had a 1 out of 64 chance of appearing in the game's Flying Fortress, and its might was only rivaled by the game's final boss, Ultima. In most installments, Ultima is the most powerful spell in any given game. It attacks all enemies and often circumvents magic defense or protections against spells like Reflect. This was turned on its head in Final Fantasy XVI though, because Ultima is now just the name of the game's antagonist. Suplexing the Train. In Final Fantasy VI, the character Sabin has a blitz ability called Meteor Strike. This ability allows him to lift an enemy in the air and smash it into the ground. He can use this ability to literally suplex a train in the Phantom Train battle. Don't believe Ondor's lies. In Final Fantasy XII, Vaughn says this line to get the attention of the Resistance. Much like the Final Fantasy X laughing scene, it's misunderstood by many. It's often thought of as a cringy scene and has since become a meme. Dating. In several of the games, you can go on dates with certain characters. By answering questions in different ways and building up invisible affection levels, you can control which character you date. Perhaps the most interesting is Final Fantasy VII, in which Cloud can go on a date at the Golden Saucer with Barret. However, this takes very careful planning to execute. Relationships with all of the female characters must be dumped, and Barret has to be pumped up. But if you're into beefy men with guns for arms, it's definitely worth it. Time compression. Originating in Final Fantasy VIII, time compression is the process of condensing all of time and space into a single moment. The sorceress Ultimecia, who's the main antagonist of the game, aims to cast this magic, place herself at the center of the singularity, and use her tremendous sorceress powers to reshape time and space. Hot girls get what they want, am I right? Tier 3. Final Fantasy VI battle glitches. Final Fantasy VI had several interesting and game-breaking battle glitches. I'll talk about just a few of them here, and I'll save the rest for a more Final Fantasy VI focused video. The first is the Vanish Doom glitch. The Vanish status made all physical attacks miss, but made all magical attacks hit. However, an unintended effect of this was that enemies that were immune to death could not be affected by the Doom spell, which caused instant death, and this includes the final boss. Gao had another game-breaking glitch. Normally, Gao could not equip any weapons, but the Merit Award relic allowed Gao to equip any weapon in the game. When he equipped the Tempest Knife, he could cast Wind Slash, attacking all enemies with wind instead of doing damage. But when he used the Stray Cat Rage ability, he could randomly use the Cat Scratch ability. That's a physical attack that does 4 times the normal damage, and that multiplier carries over to the Wind Slash, allowing him to do massive damage to all enemies. And finally, the evade stat in the original game was bugged. It had no effect. Instead, all evasion was routed through the magic evade stat, meaning the Aegis Shield, which provided a ton of magical evasion, could make characters effectively invincible. Lucky Sevens. In Final Fantasy VII, if a character's HP ever hits exactly 7,777, they immediately enter the Lucky 7 state. In this state, they deal 64 physical strikes in a row that deal 7,777 damage. Multiple reliable methods of obtaining this number of HP exist. One can get HP to 7,677 and use a potion to heal 100 HP. Emerald Weapon has an attack that deals 1,111 damage for every piece of materia equipped, or the HP switch to MP materia can be used. This allows a character to manipulate their MP to 7,777 and then in a subsequent battle remove the materia to immediately induce lucky 7s. Final Fantasy X ultimate weapons are awful. The grind for Final Fantasy X's ultimate weapons is notoriously painful, but two in particular have caused an epidemic of controllers launched into television screens. Upgrading Lulu's Onion Knight requires the player to head to the Thunder Plains and dodge 200 consecutive lightning bolts, and upgrading Titus's Khalid Bulg requires the player to win a near impossible chocobo race, getting a time of less than 0.0 seconds. This led many players to abandon the ultimate weapons altogether and just complete the game without them. The world is square. When looking for Daryl's airship in Final Fantasy VI, the party finds a blank tombstone. Upon further exploring the dungeon, the party finds 4 more tombstones that have a seemingly random assortment of letters on them. When arranged properly, the tombstones spell "the world is square" backwards. This saying can be inscribed on the initial blank tombstone to acquire the growth egg, which doubles experience gain on any character. Final Fantasy X-2 100%. Getting 100% completion in Final Fantasy X-2 is quite a chore. There are multiple missable quests, and skipping even a single cutscene will make it impossible to get 100%. At its end, though, the player is rewarded with an additional cutscene in which the protagonist from Final Fantasy X is returned to life. Tier 4. Final Fantasy IX stat increases. Final Fantasy IX has a hidden system for increasing character statistics. By equipping weapons and armor that give extra stats, bonus stats can be gained, but one character could be broken using this method. Eiko, who isn't available until later in the game, could have her stats impacted by another character, Marcus. By leveling Marcus up to level 99 during the short time he's in the party, his bonus stats can carry over to Eiko later in the game, making her extremely overpowered. Gilgamesh. A recurring character in the series, Gilgamesh is known for being a weapon collector, treasure hunter, and fierce fighter, and he is strongly associated with the Genji equipment. While it's not explicitly confirmed, it's strongly implied throughout the series that Gilgamesh is consistently the same character throughout all of his appearances, and that makes him the only canon recurring character in multiple Final Fantasy titles. The Zodiac Spear. In Final Fantasy XII, the Zodiac Spear is the strongest spear and one of the strongest weapons in the game. Getting it, however, is an annoying ordeal. The player must avoid opening 4 very accessible treasure chests and then defeat the King Bomb, a powerful foe. After doing this, the spear can be found in the Necro Hall of Nabudis, and quite early, making the rest of the game significantly easier. Calm Chest. In Final Fantasy VII, there is a chest in the city of Calm that can't be opened. Apparently, it was a part of a cancelled side quest, and the devs just forgot to remove the chest. Excalibur II. The Excalibur II is Steiner's strongest weapon in Final Fantasy IX. In order to obtain it, the player must reach the end of the final dungeon in under 12 hours. They can then search the pillar on the right side of the screen to get the weapon. This task, however, became much easier in the remastered versions, which allowed skipping of cutscenes and a speed-up feature which did not affect the in-game time. The Console Wars. The first 6 games in the Final Fantasy series were initially exclusively released on Nintendo systems, the NES and the SNES. However, Final Fantasy VII marked a split between Nintendo and Squaresoft. The reason for this change was a dispute about hardware. Nintendo wanted to use faster loading but more expensive cartridges for its new Nintendo 64, while Sony's PlayStation used higher capacity but slower loading CDs. Squaresoft wanted to introduce 3D graphics in Final Fantasy VII, and so CDs were ideal for that purpose given their higher capacity. This guy are sick. In Final Fantasy VII, Aerith speaks this line in reference to a drunk in the Sector 5 slums. This grammatical error has since become a meme. Squall is dead. In Final Fantasy VIII, the protagonist Squall is impaled through the chest by an ice spear. He heals miraculously after that with little explanation. The game at this point becomes more dreamlike, and fans postulated that he's actually dead and the rest of the game is just his dying dream. This theory, though, was debunked by series developer Yoshinori Katase, though he stated that in a hypothetical remake, he might incorporate this idea into the game. Tier 5. The boy who wants to be a blitzball. In the Kilika region of Final Fantasy X, a small child in one of the houses states that he wants to be a blitzball. This line is the same in both the English and Japanese versions and was most definitely an error. The evidence for this is that in the HD remaster in Japan, the line was corrected. However, for whatever reason, the line remains the same in the North American second version of the remaster, Tactics Level Down Glitch. In Final Fantasy Tactics, each job gets specific bonuses when leveling up, and certain trap spaces will drop a character's level by 1 and can be used an unlimited number of times. And this leveling down can be abused. You could level up in a class with high growths like a ninja, and then level down as a weak class like a chemist. This way you'd keep the higher growth rates of the ninja while just going down in level and encountering easier enemies. Repeating this process multiple times can lead to completely overpowered and broken characters. Culex. Super Mario RPG's super boss Culex is a clear reference to the Final Fantasy series. He fights the party with 4 crystals, and his OST music is the boss music from Final Fantasy IV. Cringy Cup of Noodle. Final Fantasy 15 has its issues, but its biggest and most cringy one is the blatant product placement by Gladiolus. He proclaims his love for cup of noodles in a side quest, completely ruining any immersion the player may have had in the fantasy setting. Laguna's Truck. In some of the promotional material for Final Fantasy VIII, Laguna is seen with a green truck. This truck was never used in the final game. PlayOnline.com. The Brady Games strategy guide for Final Fantasy IX is considered one of the biggest fails in strategy guide history. Anytime a secret was revealed, the strategy guide would simply say go to PlayOnline.com. This rightfully left many players feeling annoyed because they'd paid for a strategy guide that literally didn't have any information in it. It was just an advertisement for PlayOnline.com. The site does still exist, but now almost exclusively focuses on Final Fantasy XI. Tier 6. Final Fantasy II Dungeon Music. One of the tracks included on all sounds of Final Fantasy I and II is called Dungeon. This track was slated to appear in Final Fantasy II, but it wasn't used. Instead, it appears in Final Fantasy VI under the name The Magic House. Return to the World of Balance. In Final Fantasy VI, a world-changing event occurs that changes the world of balance into the world of ruin. However, a game-breaking glitch can occur in the city of Albrook. When exiting the city from a specific tile, the world of ruin can retransform into the world of balance, soft-locking the game. Go-Go is Gestal. Final Fantasy VI's Go-Go is a mime. They have no abilities of their own, and instead they can use any abilities that their party members have equipped. There have been many fan theories as to who Go-Go is, including Emperor Gestal, Setzer's former lover Daryl, and the Resistance leader Banon, among others, but none have any substantive evidence to support them. Revive Aerith. Aerith's death traumatized the fans of Final Fantasy VII, so of course a rumor eventually spread that it was possible to revive her. Because Aerith's death sends her underwater, it was thought that the underwater materia found in the submarine bay would allow the player to go underwater and revive her. That was not the case though. She is dead. Permanently. Final Fantasy. It is an urban legend that Hironobu Sakaguchi called the series Final Fantasy because he was going to quit his gaming dev job after he finished the game to return to college. However, in an interview with Chris Kohler from Wired, Nobuo Uematsu revealed that the real reason the game was called Final Fantasy is that the creators of the game thought that Squaresoft was going to go bankrupt. Clearly though, given the success of the game, this didn't happen and the company went on to have great success. FF9 Excalibur 2 Perfect Game. In a perfect game of Final Fantasy IX, all chests and action icons must be explored. All key items must be obtained, the maximum amount of all items with limited quantities must be obtained, and the Excalibur 2 must be obtained by reaching the end of the game within 12 hours. The strategy is detailed in an old GameFAQs guide that I will link in the Discridly-Do, and if you want to watch me suffer through some challenges, click the playlist right here. Thanks for watching. Bye.